You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. Welcome to tonight's Chats for Life. We have a special guest presenter, Reverend Robert Franck, who is a pastor at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Duluth, Minnesota. We are welcoming him tonight. He's going to be sharing with us a message about foster care and the ways in which we might uphold lives through that gift. And so just real quick as an opening question, how many of you have ever thought about doing or participating in foster care? So maybe. So, all right. And maybe some of us haven't, thought about it, but we're like, oh, well, yeah, let's learn about it so that maybe we do know about it. Let's go ahead and open with prayer, and then I will hand over the presentation to Pastor Franck. So if you could please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for this evening. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together to learn more about the needs we have in life, the needs that children have in life, and the blessings that we can be to each other. We ask, Lord, that you might teach us a great deal about foster care, and that you might engender us a desire to uphold the lives of those who need to be upheld. The littlest of these, those that maybe don't have moms and dads to do the things necessary to care for the children that you love. We ask, Lord, that you be with Pastor Franck as he speaks, and that you would give him wisdom and courage to speak the truth, just as he has shown the truth and loved those that you have placed in his family. We thank you for this opportunity, and we ask that you be with us this night in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you. I've done a presentation at several higher things in the past on foster care, specifically showing Christian mercy through child foster care, which is the topic that is an important one to understand. And I thought I would just introduce my family. Several of them are on here today, but my wife and I were married in 1987, and we had 9 children. When our youngest was about 7, we kind of were drawn to care for children through foster care. Actually, we kind of went through the process to be approved for that. And when we had our first child, my wife introduced him to the congregation, and I wrote a letter to the congregation in the newsletter. Thought I'd quote a little bit from that. The letter went, my wife Gail gave a very nice short talk on the morning of January 10th, introducing a new little one that was joining our family. For a short time last fall, my wife and I started the process of becoming certified as a foster care family for St. Louis County, particularly for infants. Why do we do this? A number of reasons. One, the Duluth newspapers had numerous articles over the past year describing the desperate need for foster families. And that has only increased over the last years. This was about 7 years ago, and we went through this process. We actually are kind of a long-term, a lot of families, that need just continues on because foster families tend to either kind of burn out or adopt the children that they have and then not be available for care anymore. So there's kind of a need for ongoing recruitment of foster families. And second, I think we've noticed how quickly our society is coming undone. I wrote that 7 years ago, and I think it's only kind of increased in intensity over that time. At that point, one of the things was the redefinition of marriage for the sake of adults' desires rather than what's best for children. And that really is only one symptom. There are many more. And really, children pay the greatest price here, and we should all consider what we can personally do to help. Foster care is not for anyone. There are many and various ways we can each help, from influencing public policy, voting, contributing to organizations that help. I know that pro-life organizations like Y for Life is an important aspect of that. For my family, we felt we could do more, particularly in the short-term care of infants, and so we embarked on this new adventure. It is an adventure, but we're doing it for children. One thing we can all do is pray for our societies, pray for individuals. And I ask for prayer from the congregation, for my family, for the needs of children placed in our homes, and also for the children who are there and their families. Children with needs coming from families with needs. God alone knows how best to meet all those needs. Most of all, the need is for them to hear God's word, and that we can do bringing these children to God's house and read them God's word. Our Christian faith calls us to serve others. That's not an option. We all can and must serve, though not all the same way. Even as much of our society is turning away from the Christian faith, Christ calls us all to continue to serve and help. So I wanted to, one reason why I put this presentation together and have made it on several occasions is to get people to think about foster care as an opportunity, and whether that is something that you participate in directly or something that you encourage of other people or are supportive of people who are doing that. There's a lot of different things that you can do. James 1:27 says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Foster care is something that is recognized by many people as an important aspect. I mean, not even just Christians. Many times people have come up to me and heard, or that when they hear that we do foster care, they actually thank us for doing that, even if they're not Christian, and because they realize how important it is. And, the fatherlessness of James, that's kind of an important aspect. Many children lose their fathers first and then their mothers. Many of those children would be aborted, or kind of surprised that they're not, given our society's aspect today. And we as Christians, of course, see the value of all people, and especially children. I heard someone say not too long ago that, Satan loves to attack children. And we see that in a variety of different ways. And maybe partly because of the promise that God made that he would save the world through a child. We're kind of in the Advent season preparing for Christmas. But when Christ came into the world, he got Herod to kill the children of Bethlehem. But all people have a value, and God has a plan for all people. Foster care is an important aspect, and there's a definite need. A need that has only been increasing. I haven't looked at statistics recently, but, when we got into it, I was kind of paying attention a lot to some of the statistics, and I think they've only gotten worse, but 3/4 of the children in foster care are because of drug addictions. So parents get attached to drugs and they lose their ability to care for their own children. That's one aspect of the need for foster care. Another aspect is that our society has really become a strongly me-centered society, and we see that especially with, the prevalence of abortion, the support for abortion, which is basically killing unborn children, unborn babies for the convenience of the adults. Putting adults and their desires ahead of children, and families falling apart, fatherlessness. I mean, when fathers are not present in their families, that puts a lot of stress on the mothers and on the families, and children are missing an important part of their raising. And so we got involved with foster care, and I'll describe how that has worked out for us. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the blessings of foster care, because that has been a real blessing for our family. And when I want to do that by showing some pictures. How about that? Do you see that? That's a Christmas picture from a few years ago, maybe 2 or so. And that's my family, with the 2 children on the right and the left are named Grace and Mercy. And those are children that we actually adopted through foster care. There's me and my wife to my left, and then Jacob, Abigail, and a few other my children that were at home at that time. Let's move along. Oh, I wanted to say too that at one point there's kind of I don't know, I wouldn't call it scary, but there's a picture of the child that that Rachel is holding right now, when he was he basically almost died, or did die, after an operation. I want to show that picture, even though I'm going to give a little bit of warning, because it's very messy and not nice to look at, but it shows where he's come from. But this is the first foster baby we had. His name was Christopher, and we got him. He was about 6 months old. He was a pleasant child and went back to his mom. Usually we've done about 15 infants and had them in our home for about, anywhere from 3 weeks, but more typically about 9 months, sometimes a year or more. He was in our home for about 9 months, this little boy, and then went back to his mom and dad. So of the 15 foster babies that we've had in our home, all under 2, about a third have gone back to mom and or dad, and about a third have gone to be adopted by relatives, cousins or grandparents or some fairly close relative. And then about a third have gone to be adopted by non-relatives. That is our second foster baby. We got him shortly after we got the first one. We got him, I think he was like 3 days old, and was spent about not quite a year with us, and then was adopted by relatives. That was a little boy named Asher, and he came to us for just a few weeks. He was in a foster home that was teachers. It was a mom and a dad who were teachers, and they did foster care in the summertime. And so there's a lot of different ways in which people can participate in the foster program. There's a great need, and the counties generally work with what you're able to do. There's a need for all different ages. Again, our family, we had younger kids and felt like best for us was to take infants. But he came to our home because he was getting ready to go back to dad, and dad was not quite ready to take him. But the foster home that he was in needed to have him out with a hard deadline. So he came to us for a few weeks. He almost looks like a twin of the other child that we had at the time. This was a little boy, Travis. We had him for just a few weeks. So this is an amazing thing. He came to us. He was very much abused. He had rashes over his whole body. He would pound his head onto the ground just as a kind of a stress reliever for him. And you could tell that he was very traumatized, but 3 weeks of love and care, and he turned around and then went to another foster home. Another little boy we had, he went to a non-relative, but the home that he went to had his brother. And so he went to a non-relative home, but where his brother was. He was a chunk. He was kind of fussy when he came to us, but he ate and ate and grew and grew. He's a fun little guy. There is a little girl we had. I think that was Elena, but we ended up adopting her and named her Mercy. And this is another little girl we had, which we ended up adopting her also. Her name was Grace, and they were in our home together for a short time. This other girl was with us and then went to a foster home that was her grandpa and ended up coming back to us. And we ended up adopting her. This little girl we had in our home, she was with us for a while her mom, again, some of the children coming to us, their parents are having a tough time with especially addiction and just need some help and having the kids out of their home for a while. So her mom couldn't take care of her, but she responded well to treatment, and this little girl went back to her mom. There is Grace, a little girl that we took in, just respite care. Respite care is another aspect of foster care where people can take care of, even for a day, or help foster parents who need a break for a day, a weekend, a family vacation where the foster children just can't go with them. That's another way that people can help with foster care, even if they're not able to do it full time or spend the extra time to it. There's a little boy this little boy, Edward was his name when he came to us. He was so addicted. A lot of these children come to us and they are, if their mother is using drugs while she's pregnant, the children become addicted to drugs too. And it's kind of sad because then when they're born, they go through withdrawal. There's even a medical name for it, a neonatal abstinence syndrome, NAS. And this boy was one of the most addicted little boys that we saw or had. There's a substitute opioid called methadone. We ended up having to give it to him for 5 weeks after he came to us. He was in a hospital for about a month after being born. And he was just so affected physically and in other ways by the drug use. But he turned around and became just the most pleasant personality. And he was adopted by a relative out in Colorado. And we still hear from his parents, and he ended up in a gifted kindergarten and is still became, just a very pleasant, personable guy. Seeing these kids taken off and heading into life with love when they are, early on and need that is so key. There's a little picture of Eddie, and he was kind of get a sense of him. So there's another little baby we had that came on oxygen and needed monitors. But again, love helped turn them around. There's we had 3 foster babies in our home at a time. There is a little boy we had that we were able to get him to a new foster home and an adoptive home that he ended up getting adopted. There's another little one we had. They are so cute. So there's when we had the little ones too. Now the next picture is the difficult pictures. So just a warning, because there's a lot of tubes and things. I won't spend too much time on it. So this little guy, he had open heart surgery and basically had a cardiac arrest and died, but he was brought back. And this is him not too long ago, and he's even in the picture there. So a big turnaround to him. And after, it was kind of interesting, after he was, when he was in the hospital and basically hanging on to life by a thread, this was down in Minneapolis, about 3 hours away. It was right the day before Epiphany, and I had taken him down to the hospital for his surgery and then came back. He was very hard up, and I asked our social worker, can I have a pastor go baptize him? Because the doctors were concerned. They really thought he was not going to live. And we got permission to have him baptized. So the closer Missouri Synod Church, University Lutheran Church, David Kind went over to the hospital and baptized him. He's had a ton of, this is our latest foster baby. He's had a ton of medical needs, including a helmet here, several open heart surgeries while he's been in our care, but he is doing really well. And as you can see, he's there getting Rachel's holding him in the picture there down below out at the beach. That's another little boy. We took him in there was no place for him. They said, well, can you take him for a few weeks? We took him into our home over Christmas, and he did well and went to another foster homes. This is Grace's adoption day, or near that, the little girl that we adopted, and Mercy, and that's them again. And at Christmas with those 2 foster babies that we had last Christmas. So just a few pictures, but I want to show those just to show the joy. I mean, because you can see the joy in those kids' lives and what love does. Love, showing kids love are so important, especially at an early age. My brother, long before we got into this, he and his wife got into, when he met his wife, before they got married, she was a foster mom for one child who was one of a sibling of 4. They ended up adopting the 4 together after they got married. But the youngest, when they got married, was 3, and you would think, okay, a 3-year-old would bounce back, but even young children, when they're not shown love, that does affect them for years and years and can affect them for their whole life. And that's one reason why it really is important to show love and care, and it really does turn children around. We're able to share the Christian faith with these children. Zechariah, when he first came, he didn't like singing, he didn't like hymns, he didn't like organ music, and he has really changed to that. It's not always explicit that we're able to share the gospel share Christ with families and with kids, but there are plenty of opportunities that we've experienced, and it's been a real blessing for that. Foster care, I mean, there's a ton of, foster care is not for anyone, and there are struggles. I don't want to say, kind of paint a picture like, oh, this is all good, because it is hard. Foster care is run by the state now, and so there are a lot of rules and discipline issues, especially with older kids. You got to deal with schooling situations if you have older kids. I think one of the hardest things too is that when you're dealing with the foster system, you're dealing with struggling people. You're dealing with people that are having a hard time. And, you want people to succeed, but a lot of times you don't see that. There's often failure. I kind of think of the parable of the sower and the seed. I mean, Jesus took and threw that seed out. And, a lot of the seeds in Jesus' parable, I mean, some of them were picked up by the birds, some grew amongst thorns, some grew grew for a while and withered in the sun. But there were many that did thrive and grow. And so that's kind of foster care is a part of that too. Another difficulty or hardship of foster care is the coordination of people. I mean, when you're in foster care, you're dealing with social workers, you're dealing with ad litems, which are court-appointed people that are supposed to stand up for what's best for the child. The social worker works with families. The ad litem is basically a voice for the child. You're dealing with, sometimes more or less. I mean, sometimes we deal with parents. Some foster families just say, I don't want anything to do with the parents. And, if that's the case, the social workers will work with you. We've been kind of a mixed on that. I mean, we've dealt with some parents, mothers and fathers, as it seemed appropriate. A lot of doctors. I mean, there's a lot of coordination of meetings and doctor's visits and just a whole lot of different things. And maybe one of the hardest things in foster care is when you kind of take a child, love that child, and then see that child go off. There was a little poster that I saw. It said, considering foster care, don't let the fear of loving a child who might leave deter you. Let the fear of a child not knowing love drive you. We want children to know love, and we love kids, and then they kind of go off, and that's how it is. But when you are investing, so in our training, in my wife and I, when we were doing our training, one of the things that we were told is they had some former current foster parents come and speak to people who were being trained, and one of them said, you have kids come in and they go off and they take a part of your heart with you, but that's your investment in that child, and that's what they need. I mean, they need that love. And kids can, if they know love, they can transfer that expectation of love and care to another loving home. But if they don't know love when they're young, it really does affect them, and it is investment in them. And it is, foster care is hard. I mean, it can be hard on families as well. It can apply some pressures to families. But again, it's an important aspect of things. Again, one of the reasons why I put this presentation together was to give the opportunity for people to think, okay, well, is this something that I might be able to do? I mean, I wanted youth, and as I presented at the Higher Things conferences, I wanted the youth to think about, maybe my family could participate in foster care, or maybe when I'm older and married, in a few years, my spouse and I could consider foster care. Your primary responsibility is always to your family, those God has placed with you. Care for your families first. A lot of people think, okay, well, that's an opportunity for adoption too. I mean, kids, one thing that some people have the impression that adoption is something expensive. It's like, oh, I'd like to adopt a child, but I just can't afford it. One thing that they don't realize is that adoption through foster care is not expensive, and it is, inexpensive, or, the costs are pretty much all covered. And even, through foster care, I mean, there's payments to you by the state as a foster, or by the county as a foster home. And adopting children through foster care usually comes with a little bit of help financially, not a ton, but, it's not something that needs to cost you a lot of money as to adopt children through foster care. There are challenges. I mean, you think, okay, I want to adopt a child, I'm going to go through foster care, but there are, I guess, challenges. But there are challenges, even if you go through a private agency for adoption and spend the money to get a lawyer and everything. I mean, there's so many times that parents back out, for example, or things. In foster care, adoption, I mean, foster care as a whole there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, so many times the social workers will say, well, here's the situation, this is what we know, and things are not what they say, or they don't know, or things change. So I always tell people I'm trying to talk to about you expect the unexpected, because it will happen. What's going to happen will happen. But in foster care, one thing that is people don't realize, and sometimes people think, okay, foster care, you're going to get a situation that you don't want. And in foster situations, I mean, you can be specific. You can say, I just can't handle that. And I've said no to many times that my licensor has called me up and said, we got this situation and it's just not been the right timing for us, and you feel bad about that. But they're okay with saying no. And you can say, okay, we wanted to have infants. There's a need for older kids too, but that's what we felt we could do. And that's what was honored by the licensors that we worked with in the county. You won't get burdened by something you can't handle. So if you wanted to be involved with foster care, how would you go about that? So here's how it worked for us. I know it varies somewhat state by state, even county by county. But for us, that you can get licensed as a foster home through private agencies. I mean, there's some cost to you for that. Maybe the best need is to just go through your local county social services. I reached out to the county social services, and they sent me a link to apply, or you kind of basically you apply for that. There are background checks, home studies, training that you go through. That training is not overly burdensome, but it's significant. And then, of course, receiving children, caring for them, ongoing continuing education that's required by the state. So different states have different licensing requirements and training requirements. So it's hard to say, around the country what that would be. I know some states have a lot less requirements than Minnesota, and some states have a lot more requirements. Some of the requirements, and I know that this is tending this way, that where a lot of states, the requirements are becoming more difficult for Christians to agree with and be a part of. And that's a sad thing, but I don't think that's the case all over the country. And it's not been the case for us. I think in Minnesota here and in many other places, the social workers and the licensors realize that if they cut Christians out, they're really cutting out the largest group of people willing and able and interested in helping. And that's really not something that they want to do deliberately. Again, some states are moving that way where you got to commit to things that you would not agree to. Like, if my child is transgender, I have to support that 100%. Well, that's something that you just are not able to commit to as a Christian, but I don't think that's the case in most places. So I'd encourage you, think about your personal situation, how you can help, what can you do, what is your family's strength, how are you able to help, infants, older kids, doing respite care. There are organizations, I know in Duluth, and it's not the case everywhere, but there's a really nice organization that was founded to help promote and support foster and adoptive families called New Hope for Families. And so I know that not everybody that helps out with that is involved with foster care, but they want to support that. So there are a lot of ways in which people can help and support in foster care, and I encourage that. So any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So there are, you said like different, especially for older kids, things you need to worry about with education and things like that. Do those still apply once you've adopted the child?
So once if you've adopted a child, then that child belongs to you, and they don't really care too much what you do about that child. Now, sometimes if there may be a situation where, a parent is not able to care for a child, and sort of, they will voluntarily allow their parental rights to be terminated with an agreement that, like, okay, I want some pictures and a letter for my child, or I want to visit with my child once a year or something like that. So there may be agreements in that regard, but there's not really, for children that are adopted. Part of adoption is you become the parent and have full control over that child.
And I'm just not sure how this works, but like when you adopt a child, will there be any like stipulations that like you must, like if you adopt a child with certain needs, will there be stipulations that you need to meet certain needs for that child in the future, or not?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what kind of needs you're talking about. I mean, because parents are responsible for fulfilling the needs of their children, not necessarily in a specific way, but as best as you consider best for them. I don't know if you have an example or have a.
I was just thinking, like, if you were to adopt somebody who had a learning disability, would their adoption stipulate that they must be in like a special needs school?
Oh,
instead of like
that would
being
be
able
the
to be
case.
in
I mean,
a
you'd be
regular
kind of
school?
responsible to. One thing. I mean, we homeschool most of our kids, and it's probably not going to be the option for if we had older kids in our home to just let them be homeschooled. Also, they would be kind of if they're going to a school or in public schools, that would be where they would need to go. And so,
Mhm.
but as a parent of a child, then you would have pretty much full ability to make decisions for that child. That's part of being a parent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So can I ask, I know that you've adopted a number of children and
Yeah.
you've had children of your own. How big is your family?
So we have 11 children, so we've got my wife and I have 9 biological children, and then 2 we've adopted. And this one, Zechariah, he's, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the county is moving to terminate parental rights, and we said we would be willing to take him into our home as an option too. So 11 right now, including the 2 that we've adopted. So that's but the older 3 are out of the home, and we are a little unique situation that my daughters, Elizabeth and Rachel, are 25 and they live with us. They work as nannies, but they're very flexible and help out a lot with our younger kids and also the foster home. So really we have 4 adults taking care of children. So, I mean, the younger children, especially Zechariah's had a ton of medical needs. So we're able, kind of a unique situation. Also a lot of medical knowledge and awareness. My daughter, Hannah, who's married and out of the house, is an RN. Elizabeth and Rachel were trained as CNAs. My wife was an RN in the past. So got a lot of medical experience. And then also through foster care, we have kind of learned a lot about medical needs. I mean, they started us out with some easier children, but as we went along, some were a lot more medically needy. And so, yeah, we've had to learn as we go, and have become kind of a specialized medical foster home.
So what would you say your greatest joy has been as being a foster father, a foster family? What's been your greatest joy?
I think just seeing how love has transformed children, that were so needy, so medically and psychologically, needy, and seeing them transformed. I mean, it wasn't always as, that Travis boy went 3 weeks and he had a tremendous turnaround in a short time. I mean, not everyone was that quickly, but most of the kids coming to us and seeing them struggling and seeing how well they have turned around and being able to send them to places that we felt were going to be good homes for them. Seeing that love and care and nurture turn children around. That's been the greatest joy.
Yeah. And some of those children that have come through your home and are now living in other homes, it sounds like at least one of them you've kept in touch with. Is that very common, or is that pretty rare?
I think I would say, it's hard to say how much. Now for us, it hasn't been just one, it's been several, and it kind of varies as how often. Some foster homes and adoptive homes are a lot more regular about that, making that connection, and some are just, want to move on with their life, and others, we've had some we kind of see here and there, and it's nice to connect up with them again for a little bit here and there. Some were a little bit more regular, they're further away, but we kind of connection through texting and sending pictures. So that varies a lot. It has varied for us, and I think it would be hard to have an expectation one way or another, but I mean, it is a possibility and oftentimes a good experience.
Can I ask so let's say we have someone in our life who wants to be a foster mom or a foster dad, right? Or a family in our church. What could those of us who maybe don't have that calling, or maybe just want to support those who do, what could we do to support foster families?
Well, even just encourage, words of encouragement, just raising that issue. A lot of people have thought about it, but they don't kind of get much past that thinking about it. But, just encouraging them, even like you said, letting them know that you would be supportive and helpful, getting in touch with foster parents that are close to you that you could introduce to them. I think maybe that would be a good thing to kind of, if you're not a foster family yourself, I mean, you should probably try to find some foster family that you could say, okay, well, here is this here's a family I'd like to introduce you that would be able to give you some more firsthand experience. We had a new pastor who was ordained and installed just a little ways from here, and they had no children. They wanted children. It didn't look like they were going to be able to have any of their own. And I was talking to them about foster care. I pretty much had them just about signed up for class, and then the wife became pregnant, and there's like, well, this is not the time for us to be foster home. It's like, well, good, I'm happy for you, but keep it in mind, maybe in the future, so yeah, just raising the issue and promoting and being aware of that opportunity.
And I guess I have one final question. So what do you think are the important, or maybe there's just one, or maybe there's multiple things, what's important for a foster family to be able to do? Like, are there any qualities you would say? Like when you were talking, I thought, okay, so maybe the ability to be flexible, right? Expect the unexpected is a good quality.
That's a big one, yeah.
But what other qualities would you say would be ideal in a couple or in a family, right?
Well, flexibility, I think having communication skills, I think is a big quality, because there's so many people that you end up having to communicate with. As I mentioned, you've got to communicate with social workers and, doctors and all that. There's that aspect of it, of foster care. Yeah, just the desire to show love and care for children. I think those are some of the main qualities. I mean, it's not, and just like, there's different styles of parenting and different styles of families, just as, kind of how families organize themselves. That families can organize themselves in different ways. Foster families are the same thing. I mean, there's such a need for foster homes, different structure. I mean, being willing to think about that different structure. One of the things that our county did was they realized that a lot of kids there were not emergency foster homes, and they kind of ended up recruiting a kind of an emergency foster home that could take a larger number of kids and care for them in the short term, so that keep kids out of shelters. Because I mean, this is going to break your heart, but there are a lot of times there just are not places for kids, and little children go to shelters like what you think of, where homeless men and women and sometimes families are put up in rather not very nice accommodations in the downtown of your big cities. Sometimes children end up being sent to those as well, because there's just no place for them. And that is sad. And it's traumatic for the kids too. But, the counties sometimes have no choice. And I think if people would understand more just the desperate need of the counties for that. COVID is kind of, the COVID and all that, for a while, the need was down. I mean, just because social workers, police were not interacting with people. And so it wasn't that, so there was not quite as many kids being put into the foster system, not because kids weren't facing desperate situations, because it just wasn't being seen. I mean, teachers weren't seeing kids and their home abuse situations. That kind of has picked up again. And so there's just a real desperate need for, and like I said, the drug abuse situation, substance abuse is a big part of why kids are in foster care. And so that's one thing I've kind of been a little bit focused on in my own state a little bit, is, to get the state to deal with some of the substance abuse issues, because that affects kids. When adults are abusing drugs and not able to take care of their children, then the children have to be cared for elsewhere. And that's really need to get some help for adults in that way. But yeah, so just being aware of some of these related issues too, and seeing how you can support that and help that and attend to that as a society. There's a lot of different pieces that kind of all come together, or fall apart. And I think we're seeing that more and more, just the needs of our society are growing, and it's hard on kids. But foster parents are an important part of, the care for children. And it doesn't have to be adoptive homes. Foster care has changed over the years. It used to be that they would have foster parents And the foster parents were told, you cannot adopt these kids, separated it out. And that was, I think they realized jumping around home to home is hard on kids. And now I think, again, don't always know, can't always foretell the future, but there are a lot of people going to foster care because they want to adopt. And that's good. I mean, the county is happy, they're happy to have that. And they know that. I mean, so if that's what people are gearing for, they will take kids that the social workers think, this kid is probably not going to be going back to his parents. And they'll put that child in a home that is willing to adopt them from the start. And that's a good thing for that child. It's also a good thing for the parents. I mean, things change, but that's what they try to do. So it's a way that, or, if you're wanting to care for a child for a shorter time, they'll try to. It doesn't always work. I mean, like adoptive parent, okay, I want a child that, is how I want it. That's not always going to be the case. You may wait a while for that. Yeah, I mean, being flexible and having that opportunity, and they will place children with you. Some people say, I want to adopt an infant and raise a child from the beginning and probably not have parental involvement. Well, there are kids that come up that the social workers realize, okay, this child needs a parent. Now, mom and dad are not in the picture. That may come up, and it does come up. So they'll try to place infants or older kids or whatever in homes where they kind of can hopefully be moved as little as possible. I mean, again, that's not always the case, because sometimes the ICWA law is another thing that deal with, especially here. Native American children are by law need to be placed with Native foster and adoptive homes. And that's not always possible, but they try to work around that. They try to work with that. And so we've had a number of infants that we knew were going to be going to a Native foster home and were with us for a short time. That's another whole topic.
So earlier you had mentioned the fear of loving a child and then having to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Do you have any other insights on that for somebody who that might be a big stopping block for them to getting into it? What do you do when you're saying goodbye to the child?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still just as hard as it was the first time, or have you
Yeah, I
found
mean,
ways of making
it
better?
is hard. Talk to my family, they say a lot of chocolate ice cream. But, everyone deals with that in its own way. And I think just for me, it's helpful to realize that it's hard, but that's, what we poured into that child was what that child needs. And that part of your heart is going with that child, been an investment in that child's life that will pay dividends for that child. So just knowing that, I think, is helpful, and realizing that that's, that might be the situation, going in, but yet, I mean, you don't want to love a child any less just because that child might be leaving either, because that child does need love and care and bonding, looking at people. I mean, just kind of being connected to someone. And adoptive, some adoptive families are a lot better at, thinking about that and making that transition. I know that the one that was adopted out in Colorado, the parents did not have an opportunity to kind of go back and forth because they lived so far, but they video chatted. They put pictures of our family up in that child's bedroom, kind of real, it's always helpful to put yourself in the position of that child. I mean, if a child is like moved, boom, leaves one home and goes to another home, it's almost like, what if that would happen to you? I mean, if you woke up one day and you have all new clothes and new smells and new people, I mean, you would wonder if you were going crazy. I mean, you would really be psychologically traumatized by, it's like, was I dreaming? Was that just out of nowhere? So realizing that and kind of working with that child to help that child, and especially, as a child is transitioning, to work with that new home, to have a transition period. And they do try to do that as well as they can. I mean, for social workers, especially, like if the child is moving to a new home, they'll like meet the new home and kind of go back and forth somewhat and transition to kind of help that child make that transition and do it well. again, that's not always possible, but, just kind of having a perspective of that child and kind of seeing where that child is going, I think it's helpful. And it's also helpful then for foster parents, okay, anticipating that. And again, we've had good experience for the most part with, they don't say, okay, this child is leaving you tomorrow. We kind of like, okay, we're going to move it in, move this child in, 5 days or a week or 2 weeks, and give you the opportunity to help that child transition, but also be kind of deal with that in your own self too. So that can be helpful. Again, that's not always possible. So kind of expect the unexpected again and realize that that's how things sometimes go.
So is there anything in particular that you do to try to help the foster kids as they're transitioning?
Well, and again, we've had mostly infants, so it's not like you can always talk to them and reason with them, but, showing pictures, working with the visits, if it's going back to parents, they've got having those parents being able to see their child as much as possible, or the new adoptive homes, seeing that child and kind of interacting with them over time is something that's helpful. Seeing pictures and kind of seeing the faces and kind of anticipating that is, doing that as we're able. Sending along children, sometimes when they come to us, they have no belongings or very few belongings. And so, we always try to send along with a child that's going off somewhere their favorite toys, the clothes that they know, so that hopefully the new home will kind of realize that transition too. But the child is going to have some familiar things that they can take with them and see, and again realize that kind of have some stability in their lives too.
Well, thank you so much for your insight and for sharing your story and the wonderful way in which we can, as Christians, love our neighbors, our littlest neighbors, through foster care and through supporting foster care families. Certainly, you spoke a lot about love tonight, and that sacrificial love is life-changing love, right? And the Christians are well suited to share that sacrificial love, because they have also been poured into, right, with the same sacrificial love that Christ has. So thank you for that. I know we are nearing the end, so I want to make sure to just shout out for next time, which will be in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking to a woman who actually is the executive director of a pregnancy care center in Indiana. So we'll be inviting her to come speak to us. So we hope that you come back for that. And one last time, thank you so much, Pastor Franck, for being here and for answering all of our questions. It's been a great learning opportunity, and I think will be a very helpful podcast in the future. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.